This is Digital Anarchist at RSA Conference 2019.
Hi everybody, this is Charlene O'Hanlon with Digital Anarchist. We're here at RSA Conference 2019 having some really great conversations. This is a great show. I am sorry if you are not here because we are having such a good time and learning so much. And my next conversation today is with Mark Sangster, who is the VP and Industry Security Strategist at eSentire, right? I got it right?
That was good.
Awesome, all right, great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Glad to have you here.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
How's the show for you so far? I know it's first day, but...
It's early days, but this is probably one of the busiest shows that we've had. It's hectic, but the right hectic. Right?
Ah, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. All right. So, as I understand, you guys have a report coming out that talks about insider threats or third-party risks.
Third-party risks. So,
okay.
you know, absolutely right. So we commissioned this this report because we know that supply chain and the extension in a more distributed world is one of the sort of the top priorities that most companies should have. And that's interesting because that's some of what came out of this report that we ran with research of 650 different IT and security leaders and practitioners.
So what were some of the things that the report revealed, and did any of the result findings surprise you?
I don't think they did. I think they confirm a lot of what people already know, but what we typically see is a bit of a paradox between, I think, the top level macro thinking, which says, you know what, we have policies in place and we do some kind of vetting and analysis and therefore we're in good shape. But then when you look at the bottom line number, nearly half of these companies experience breaches from their third party vendors, and what's worse is only 15% of those vendors actually report those breaches to their clients. So those kind of numbers, they don't give a good result on the scoreboard.
Well, do you think that has anything to do with the fact that it's not them, it's those guys over there, and so we don't really, as the front line to the customer, it's not our responsibility to report it?
You know, you're right, and I think that's actually one of the key findings of this result, is that even though the majority of companies do have some kind of security policy, a formal one, a written one in place, they're not always doing some of the key things that we think are critical, and this is what came out in the research. And one of them is, I think, exactly what you're referencing here, which is you have to delineate all those roles and responsibilities, and what do we do? Because otherwise what you do have and happen is the proverbial ball drops between those two players because I thought that was your responsibility and you thought that was my responsibility. It's pretty common.
So one of the things that comes to mind for me is the role of these third-party risks when it comes to compliance issues such as GDPR.
Oh, absolutely.
And then California's got its own version now.
Yeah.
How important do you think that it's going to be for companies to really understand the role that their third parties are playing in their whole security posture?
Well, I think it's going from a nice to have to a must have, right? Because you're absolutely right. Under GDPR, there's that notion of data control and data processing that you have to understand why you're collecting it and who it goes through and where it goes and so on. And the CCPA, I think, the California Consumer Privacy Act, takes that even further because now you have to throw the economic dimension into that and understand why you've collected the data, how it's resold, if it's resold, and where it goes and how they use it and so on. So it's no longer a checkbox, I think. You now fundamentally, at the core structure of the business, at the board level, they have to understand what those ramifications are and know that they have those under control and that can be measured.
So going back to the survey a little bit, as far as the findings are concerned, did you guys find that the majority of the third-party risks or breaches or data breaches related to those third parties, were they more technology-focused or were they more, kind of stupid human moves?
Good question. So about 15% of them were the human error, shall we say, to use a euphemism, and the rest of them were some kind of combinations, spyware, malware, ransomware, you take your pick. But what we see is as the attacks become more sophisticated, they don't always use the most sophisticated methodologies, right? They can still use yesterday's technologies in some cases. It's how they apply them and who they target and the sort of the cleverness in the way that they lure them in, and that's where we see an increase. And I don't think that's where necessarily the third-party vendors, right, your supply chain, recognize that, right? And all too often, I think, because they think they're down the chain somewhere, they're removed from either that responsibility or they're just not a target. What information do I have that's worth stealing? And maybe they don't have anything intrinsic, but the reality is they're now a vector into another organization that is going to be targeted. Think about the firm, the marketing firm, the law firm that supports a large bank, right? Or an investment brokerage, whatever it is. The criminals can go in through that soft underbelly and then get to that hardened target, and that's where they really want to get to steal those assets.
Right, and that's what happened with the big Target breach a couple of years ago. It was
there. Absolutely. I mean, and that Target HVAC breach, of course, has become that kind of the poster child for this. But we see all sorts of other ones, right? Law firms that were breached on Wall Street, and the information that was stolen was then used to front-run trades by defrauding banks, and that's pretty common, right? Even more so now, we're seeing technologies that are inherent to businesses. So think things like patient record systems in healthcare organizations, that on the darknet you can go out and buy tools and exploit kits to actually target those top vendors, right? It is the commoditization, I think, of the old ME-DOCS type of attack, right? Where that accounting software in the Ukraine was used to effectively deliver one of the most nefarious strains of ransomware. And we're now getting to that point where we're saying, that's a great way. I can go after healthcare institutions this way, or law firms that way, or banks in another way, by targeting those core systems they have to have in their environment, and there's no way to turn those off, right? They have to accept those risks.
And it's pretty scary too, because you think about how many people even your company works with, how many third-party vendors, and how many my company works with, and we're all connected at the end of the day. It's almost like that 6 degrees of separation thing, but it's from a security standpoint, how far is my company from your company, and am I at risk because you're at risk?
And I think that's absolutely true. The nth degree is kind of how we refer to it. And I think at the end of the day, your eyes, the direct line of sight, and even the things you might have, eye in the sky and radar and so on, might see over the horizon, but you cannot see those 360 degrees. So what you do need to do is put the right kind of contractual obligations in place, right? Do the right investigations and hold those vendors responsible so that they understand that there's that knock-on effect down the line, right? So that you're making sure that everyone understands those responsibilities, everyone's kind of culpable in that situation, and if something does occur, everyone knows their obligations, right? I have to report to you something has occurred, therefore I need to notify you of this security event. Doesn't necessarily have to be a breach, and then we go from there.
Okay, all right. So the report is out this week. So how can folks get a copy of it?
So they can actually come to our website or come to our booth here at RSA and visit us, and we will absolutely send them a copy.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you so much. Such great information. I always love talking about this stuff. So.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. Pleasure to be here, Charlene. Thank you.
This is Digital Anarchist.